here.
Mobile, Alabama. Forget the charm. Beneath the Spanish moss, a humid darkness breathes, hiding the ghosts of Civil War trauma and lost souls from the dark Gulf waters. Close your eyes. You can hear them. This is the list they don't want you to see. The top 15 haunted places. 1. USS Alabama Battleship Memorial Park, Mobile. The USS Alabama, the mighty A veteran of 9 battle stars from the Pacific Theater, now serves as a static memorial in Mobile, Alabama. Its post-service history is deeply overshadowed by persistent anecdotal evidence of lingering spiritual activity. Visitors and staff routinely report sensory anomalies that defy physical explanation, unauthorized footsteps echoing through the superstructure, the distinct clang of equipment, and the sulfurous scent of stale cigarette smoke saturating the lower decks. This smell is most pungent near the massive, decommissioned engine room, suggesting a sustained, residual presence tied to the heavy labor of the wartime crew. Investigators attribute much of the documented phenomena to the residual energy of extreme wartime stress, while others cite specific solitary spirits. A commonly reported figure is the spirit of a cook, who reportedly fell seriously ill during service, whose lonely presence allegedly still haunts the galley, manifesting as sudden, severe drops in temperature even during the humid Alabama summer. More unnerving, however, are the documented mechanical anomalies logged by security and maintenance crews, the baffling, unpowered movement of heavy tools, and the critical activation of deactivated machinery. Valve wheels spinning violently, or massive turret mechanisms grinding into motion, all without electrical power or human intervention. Official park records maintain the vessel is inert, a static monument to history. Yet, those who patrol the steel decks after hours know the truth. They report feeling acutely observed in the dark corridors where over 500 men lived and fought. The pervasive fear rests not in the grand scale of the past, but in the intimate, cold terror of hearing the rhythmic thud of boots on steel treads when the mighty A is supposed to be utterly silent, a cold, empty hull awaiting the return of the morning light. 2. Malaga Inn, Mobile. The Malaga Inn, a venerable structure in Mobile, Alabama, disguises a brutal history beneath its antebellum facade, surviving the Civil War and thriving through the turbulent era of Prohibition as a speakeasy and known house of assignation. The inn became the stage for a critical, unsolved domestic tragedy. The persistent paranormal activity focuses entirely on the 3rd floor, specifically room 300, the purported site of the 1920s strangulation of a young woman, often simply referred to in local accounts as the bride. Her death was not instantaneous, leaving an indelible imprint of fear and struggle on the physical location. Investigative reports confirm guests and staff consistently report an overwhelming, distinct scent of gardenias, her alleged preferred perfume, that manifests suddenly in the hallways, often preceding sharp, chilling drops in ambient temperature. These olfactory anomalies are frequently paired with audial evidence. The faint, rhythmic sound of a woman weeping detected near the central staircase late at night, sometimes accompanied by phantom footsteps, traversing the corridor outside the sealed room 300. The haunting is not a chaotic residue, but a predictable, cyclical reenactment of the trauma. The Malaga Inn, therefore, functions as a containment vessel for a specific, violent memory. When maintenance staff attempt entry into the currently restricted room 300, the latch often jams inexplicably from the inside, suggesting an active occupant preventing access. The most disturbing recurring witness testimony involves the mirror in the room adjacent to 300U, where rapid fluctuations in humidity sometimes reveal the faint, temporary etching of a woman's outstretched, desperate handprint across the glass, always vanishing before documentation can be completed. 3. Oakley Historic Complex, Mobile. The Oakley Historic Complex in Mobile, Alabama, constructed in 1833 by James W. Roper, is documented as the epicenter of intelligent spectral presence, far exceeding its function as an architectural museum. Historical reports compiled by museum staff focus activity in the second-story bedrooms and the main parlor. Phenomena consistently initiate with abrupt, localized temperature drops, often accompanied by the distinct, heavy scent of decaying gardenias, a reliable precursor to the main apparition. This haunting is historically attributed to a young woman who succumbed to illness or heartbreak inside the house in the mid-19th century, remaining permanently anchored to the structure. The evidence of her persistence is extensive and consistent in security logs, detailing unexplained noises and the movement of sealed objects from the upper floor after lockdown. Multiple eyewitness accounts, including those of historical researchers, report seeing a distinct pale silhouette positioned at the western-facing second-floor window. The figure, consistently described in period clothing, appears locked in a posture of profound, unresolved sorrow, staring eternally across the grounds. Though the apparition fades instantly when directly addressed, her presence subtly distorts light across the polished surfaces and mirrors throughout the main level. The complex also houses the cold spot, a persistent thermal anomaly in the servants' dining room, which maintains a temperature exactly 5 degrees below adjacent areas. Photographic evidence spanning decades, collected by historical societies, consistently captures a vague, distorted shape fixed within this precise corner. This entity is immobile, silent, and possesses no known historical identity. It is simply a fixed, chilling manifestation within Oakley's structure, a non-residual narrative that continues to actively unfold and defy all conventional physical explanation. Fort Bragg Mitchell Mansion, Mobile. The Bragg Mitchell Mansion, completed in 1855, presents a preserved antebellum ideal, yet its structural integrity is compromised by documented, recurring spectral phenomena. Investigation reports cite the second-floor landing as the epicenter of activity. The primary residual haunting, designated the Gray Lady, manifests as an indistinct female form observed exclusively traversing the grand staircase, moving toward the lower rotunda. Witnesses, including maintenance staff and historical society volunteers, describe an extreme thermal drop associated with the sighting, often preceding the visual manifestation by approximately 15 seconds. This thermal anomaly is typically localized to the space directly beneath the central chandelier, suggesting a fixed gravitational point for the manifestation. Auditory evidence collected during nocturnal surveillance includes low-frequency moaning, interpreted as acute distress or weeping, originating from the West Wing Master Suite. These recordings are often accompanied by an atypical olfactory sensation, a transient, intense scent of decaying magnolias and sulfuric medicinal compounds. Historical records suggest the mansion functioned intermittently as a recovery site during the latter stages of the Civil War, though primary documentation remains fragmented. The persistence of the auditory loops, regardless of external environmental noise, suggests a fixed, non-interactive psychic residue. This specific sequence of sound and scent consistently points toward a potential terminal medical event within the residence, not merely a transient visitation. The psychological impact on long-term observers is marked by increased anxiety and reported feelings of being physically obstructed or followed while navigating the central hall. A specific incident recorded in 2008 detailed a caretaker sustaining minor abrasions after reportedly being pushed from the first landing by an unseen force during a temperature spike of 105 degrees Fahrenheit, a reverse of the typical thermal drop. The Bragg Mitchell entity does not communicate or react. It simply repeats a trajectory of profound sorrow, endlessly descending a staircase that leads only to the unavoidable reality of its own demise. Trapped within the house's meticulously curated history, Richard's Darr House Museum, Mobile. The Richard's Darr House in Mobile, an 1860 Italianate marvel famed for its cast iron gallery of the gables, retains more than architectural history. The structure, preserved meticulously since the mid-20th century, harbors chronic paranormal instability centered primarily on the third floor. This area, closed to public exhibition, is the documented epicenter of consistent activity reported by staff and security personnel over decades. The primary manifestation involves the central third-story window overlooking Government Street. Numerous accounts confirm a spectral image, typically perceived in the hour following sunset, of a woman in period attire standing motionless. She appears not as a living person, but as a colorless, dimensional refraction fixed within the glass, a mournful photograph staring down from the home's peak. These documented visual disturbances are often preceded by distinct auditory anomalies. Staff reports consistently log the sound of heavy, dragging footsteps ascending the secure main staircase after closing hours. Originating from an unknown source, these percussive events migrate to the upper hallway, culminating in acute, non-directional sounds of profound weeping or guttural crying. Local tradition attributes the entity to an unnamed resident who endured severe loss during Mobile's wartime period. Her inescapable grief manifesting as a perpetual vigil impressed upon the historic residents. The documented relocation of objects and unexplained cold spots reinforce the house's status as a site of entrenched historical unrest. Six, Magnolia Cemetery, Mobile. Magnolia Cemetery, established in 1836 on the banks of Mobile Bay, holds the historical markers of coastal Alabama's devastating 19th century. The cemetery's proximity to the marsh meant that the air, already heavy with humidity and the scent of magnolias, was perpetually thick with the miasmas believed to carry disease. This low-lying ground became the final resting place for thousands who succumbed not to war, but to the swift, horrific efficiency of yellow fever and cholera. The municipal records indicate overwhelming mortality during the 1850s, 1860s, and 1870s. Entire families wiped out within weeks and buried hastily beneath marble that now cracks under the pressure of time. The sheer weight of historical grief here is palpable, a documented reality of suffering that precedes any folklore. Visitors often report an unnerving coldness centered around the ornate crypts and the section known as Babyland, and where the infant victims of the epidemics were laid to rest. This is not the cold of nighttime, but an internal, suffocating chill reported even on sweltering afternoons. One specific structure, the elaborate wrought iron enclosed plot belonging to the Boyington family, sometimes erroneously called the Iron Maiden, is notorious for its intense residual energy. Witnesses claim to hear muffled sobs emanating from the enclosed area, or the distinct, measured rhythm of a woman humming a 19th century dirge near dusk, the sound vanishing if approached directly. Security logs document multiple instances of electrical failures and unexplained power drains near the oldest Confederate plots, near the graves of Semmes and Father Ryan, confirming unusual activity concentrated in areas of intense historical trauma. The horror of Magnolia is not a singular apparition, but the aggregate echo of mass death, the documented facts, the sudden epidemic fatalities, the specific, isolating grief of the Victorian era, and the sheer volume of the interred create an environment where the veil is thinned by historical necessity. When the dense bay fog rolls in from the water and obscures the decaying marble angels, it carries with it a scent not entirely of damp earth, but of the sickness that stole Mobile's residents. A chilling reminder that the thousands buried beneath the moss are not entirely at peace, their historical anguish now permanently imprinted on the landscape. 7. Kate Shepherd House Bed and Breakfast, Mobile. The Queen Anne Victorian structure known as the Kate Shepherd House, B&B, established in 1897, holds a documented history of lingering despair. The namesake, Kate Shepherd, lived here with her husband, Henry, a prominent figure in Mobile society. Historical accounts suggest Henry's extensive infidelities led to Kate's profound emotional deterioration. Following a period of intense grief and psychological decline, Kate died within the home. Her spirit, however, reportedly refused to depart. Bound by the trauma of betrayal, guests and staff regularly report classical signs of residual haunting, primarily centered around the second-floor bedrooms and the main staircase landing. The most persistent occurrence is the distinct sound of weeping, a soft, inconsolable sobbing audible late at night when the house is otherwise silent. This sound lacks a clear source. Investigations typically find the areas empty. Furthermore, lights often fluctuate, and small, sentimental objects particularly. Trinkets left near the vanity mirrors are inexplicably relocated or turned over, suggesting manipulation by an unseen, restless entity. Paranormal investigators often categorize the Shepherd haunting as a classic case of emotional attachment, where the severity of the original trauma prevents resolution. The activity is rarely aggressive but carries an overwhelming, palpable sadness. The atmosphere in certain areas, particularly the historic master suite, is consistently reported as heavy, cold, and permeated by a sense of profound historical loneliness, the echo of a heartbreak that continues to reside within the Victorian walls. Eight, Old Southern Market Mobile Carnival Museum, Mobile. The building now housing the Mobile Carnival Museum, originally the 1850 Warmer House Market structure, operates on a foundation of severe civic trauma during periods of yellow fever and the Civil War. The market floor was swiftly converted into a massive municipal infirmary, processing thousands. The basement, once used for storage, became a temporary morgue for the countless dead. This rapid institutional shift from commerce to catastrophe imprinted the structure with a powerful, localized residual haunting, recognized by historians and museum staff. Paranormal observations consistently document phenomena linked directly to these desperate operations. Employees report the distinct, grating sound of cast iron gurney wheels rolling across the lower-level concrete late at night, often coinciding with sharp temperature drops consistent with makeshift cold storage. Furthermore, investigators catalog disembodied vocalizations notably weak, continuous weeping emanating from the locations where patients expired on makeshift cots. The residual energy focuses strictly on the agonizing moment of death. Trapped within the heavy masonry of the original structure, the modern exhibits, draped in silks and gilded crowns of Mardi Gras royalty, offer a superficial mask over the building's relentless psychic burden. Security footage periodically captures translucent distortions moving through the halls, figures dressed in stained cotton shrouds or military fatigue, briefly obstructing the view of the jewel-toned displays. The structure does not hold a ghost. It holds the perpetual echo of failed quarantine and institutional collapse, replaying the desperate, last hours of Mobile suffering inside its ornate walls. 9. Fort Conde Mobile. Fort Conde, established in 1723, operated under 4 colonial flags before its partial dismantling. The current reconstruction sits upon original foundations, integrating elements that retain significant residual energy. During the British occupation 1763-1780, the underground casemates served as holding cells for high-risk prisoners. Archivists documented numerous inexplicable fatalities within these cramped subterranean spaces, officially attributed to fever but recognized locally as deaths resulting from neglect, despair, and summary execution. The site is saturated with the oppressive history of confinement. The most consistent phenomena are centered around the Queen's Battery bastion. Witnesses report severe temperature drops, often over 20 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds, accompanied by a distinct smell of sulfur unique to the deep foundation stone. Muffled French commands are a recurring auditory event, often originating late at night near the powder magazine. The most disturbing observation is the manifestation of a small, 18th century shadow figure fully black, lacking dimension patrolling the walkway above the main gatehouse. Its appearance invariably induces acute psychological distress, manifesting as profound paranoia and an overwhelming compulsion to abandon the site perimeter immediately. Investigation teams confirm high baseline EMF levels throughout the preserved sections, spiking dramatically near the original British guardhouse foundations. Local legend posits that the residual anguish belongs to French soldiers imprisoned by the British following the 7 Years' War, left to starve slowly in the lowest levels. Their protracted torment, recorded within the limestone and mortar of the fortifications, is not merely a historical memory, but an active, cyclical environmental stressor. The site functions less as a museum and more as a contained acoustic vessel for documented colonial suffering. 10. The steeple former Old Shell Road Church, Mobled. The rusted weather vane atop the former Old Shell Road Church steeple stands as a silent monument to civic decay. Constructed during a period of immense religious fervor and later abandoned, the structure never truly relinquished its earliest spiritual tenets. Local officials attribute the persistent, non-localized drop in temperature near the vestry to a geological anomaly, conveniently ignoring the accounts from maintenance crews who report the overwhelming scent of ozone and burnt linen whenever the mercury dips below 50 degrees. The steeple, once a civic beacon, now acts as a colossal, highly conductive lightning rod for residual despair. Concentrating energy in its upper levels, the height of the spire is the definitive locus of the horror. Witnesses legally commissioned to inspect the compromised integrity of the tower, a task routinely abandoned, describe a pressure distortion that initiates around the third belfry level. It is a kinetic anomaly, the sound of a heavy body shifting on the rotten planks, immediately followed by a dizzying internal silence. The pervasive local legend involves a former sexton who, distraught over widespread illness among the congregation, ascended the spire in 1912 during a violent Gulf storm. He was never recovered, yet forensic data from the bell chamber contains sand and splintered wood, consistent only with a catastrophic impact event that somehow failed to destabilize the structure. The infrastructure itself holds this impact in permanent suspension. When the strong coastal wind strikes the crossbeams, residents along the old route claim they hear the sustained, vibrating hum of a perfectly tuned bell that hasn't physically existed in the tower for 70 years. A terrifying sonic echo of the sexton's final, desperate attempt to ring a warning. The true danger is not that the entity will descend, but that the structure remains an active, hostile capture mechanism, perpetually replaying the moment of fatal disorientation for any observer foolish enough to ascend past the point where the support ropes meet the spire's deep shadow. Elf's Church Street Graveyard, Mobile. The wrought iron gates of the Church Street Graveyard stand sentinel over Mobile, a sprawling necropolis established in 1819. Beneath the suffocating weight of Spanish moss and crumbling marble, the ground holds secrets deeper than the marshy water table that necessitated the city's dense collection of above-ground vaults. This plot is not just a repository of early mobile residents, but a ledger of the city's grim history, notably the enduring echoes of the slave trade. The atmosphere here is a documented pressure, an inescapable heat that seems to have trapped the lingering sorrow of 2 centuries within the brick enclosure. Within the weathered enclosure rests Captain Joseph Ledyard. Interred in the older section, Ledyard commanded the Clotilda, the last documented slave ship to illegally deliver African captives to American shores in 1860, landing them furtively upriver before burning the vessel. Locals speak less of Ledyard's own restless spirit than they do of the oppressive silence around his marker, a pocket of palpable dread that affects electromagnetic readings. However, the most consistent spectral manifestation remains the pale, drifting figure seen gliding between the vaults near the center mausoleum. The woman in white. Accounts catalog her as inconsolable, gliding low above the grass, perpetually searching. Historians often link this apparition to a common Victorian narrative of grief. Yet those who have worked maintenance within the graveyard cite an extreme temperature drop and a smell of stale gardenias preceding her appearance. She is never hostile, only desolate, vanishing instantly if approached. The truly unsettling reality of Church Street is not the possibility of a sudden, startling specter, but the tangible, historical residue of suffering that adheres to the stones, manifesting as an eternal, documented sorrow echoing through the humid air. Tvíþjóð Sanger Theater, Mobile. Built in 1927, the Sanger Theater in Mobile is an architectural landmark, but its history is complicated by persistent paranormal claims. The most documented entity is George, a former employee believed to have died tragically, some say of a heart attack, while working the third-floor catwalks during a live performance in the 1960s. His death was an isolated, unobserved incident during peak activity, leaving residual energy fixed high above the orchestra pit. George now manifests as a proprietary presence, deeply attached to his former duties, often appearing to staff as a shadowy figure, moving rapidly across the upper balconies or the precarious rigging systems. Stage managers routinely report inexplicable manipulation of the lighting boards and the older dimmer racks, which flicker or spike wattage even when officially disconnected from power. During recent renovations, multiple contracted construction crews abruptly quit after experiencing tools vibrating violently or being physically thrown from the catwalks onto the stage floor below. The phantom activity intensifies after midnight. Doors to the green room and technical storage often lock themselves from the inside, despite lacking external handles, trapping maintenance staff in sudden, profound darkness. The defining characteristic of the Sanger haunting is the intense, localized cold spots, a distinct, measurable drop in temperature registered by technicians near the third-floor box seats, areas George would have actively patrolled. Employees describe the air as thick and heavy, frequently punctuated by the sound of heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoing above an otherwise empty, silent auditorium, suggesting George continues his eternal duty, monitoring a show that ended decades ago. Third night, Battle House Renaissance Hotel, Mobile. The Battle House Renaissance stands as a grand, often rebuilt monument to Mobile's turbulent history, a place where antebellum elegance masks decades of intense psychological residue. Originally built in 1852, its halls hosted crucial strategic meetings during the Civil War, and the current structure, though a reconstruction, maintains the precise footprint of profound wartime anxiety and immense financial failure. The atmosphere on the upper floors, particularly the sixth, carries a palpable, documented coldness that modern HVAC systems cannot logically explain. suggesting a persistent thermal anomaly correlated with traumatic events. The most persistent narrative centers on a tragedy tied directly to the hotel's 1908 iteration. Historical accounts detail the demise of a despairing northern financier who, facing ruin after a catastrophic loss, elected to end his life within his rented room. The methodology was brutal and direct. He hanged himself from the ceiling fixture. Guests and staff assigned to the rooms near the 601 suite have repeatedly described the sound of something heavy dragging across the floorboards, or the inexplicable sight of a shadow swaying gently, long after the room has been vacated and secured for the night. These are not folkloric embellishments. The consistency of staff reports across different decades suggests a traumatic loop, playing out against the backdrop of luxury. Security logs confirm multiple instances of movement sensors being tripped in empty corridors near the anniversary of the alleged suicide. The chilling persistence of this entity, a man eternally suspended in failure, reminds visitors that the polished granite and rich mahogany of the Battle House are merely a shell containing the inescapable burdens of the past. 14. Mobile Infirmary Medical Center, Mobile. The Mobile Infirmary Medical Center, comprising several generations of structures, harbors documented instances of recurring spectral activity, concentrated primarily within the oldest main campus wings. These phenomena center on a residual entity identified by staff as the Gray Lady, commonly believed to be the spirit of a dedicated nurse who either died during an epidemic or tragically overworked herself in the institution's demanding early 20th century period. The pattern of disturbance aligns strictly with historical patient care protocols, suggesting an instinctual continuation of duty despite the cessation of life. Specific incident reports frequently originate from the 4th and 6th floors, particularly around the intensive care and long-term recovery units. Overnight personnel log occurrences of medical carts being inexplicably moved, patient call lights switching off instantaneously without physical intervention, and sudden, localized drops in ambient temperature, often exceeding 15 degrees Fahrenheit near the foot of unstable patients. Witnesses, primarily registered nurses and physician assistants, describe encountering a translucent, gray-robed female figure near patients who are medically critical. In several documented cases, the apparition was observed adjusting patients' bedding or confirming vital signs, only to vanish entirely when approached or challenged. This behavior complicates standard assessment, as staff must continually discern if observed vital changes are physiological or paranormal in origin. The persistence of these encounters has integrated the legend into the professional culture of the infirmary. While management rarely addresses the phenomenon openly, the consistent data necessitates internal procedures for handling reports of unexplained environmental anomalies to maintain critical patient safety. The haunting is thus not merely folklore, but a consistent operational factor influencing night shift staffing and the perception of professional responsibility, suggesting that in this environment, the obligation to care for the sick extends well beyond mortality. 15. Alabama Cruise Terminal, former State Docks area, Mobile. The Alabama Cruise Terminal operates atop ground that was historically state docks, a massive Voige's 1920s infrastructure project built on Mobile Bay's shallow, unstable floor. The foundations are driven deep through a layered history of commerce, epidemic death, and industrial accidents. Yellow fever outbreaks repeatedly decimated Mobile's waterfront population, filling shallow graves near the current terminal footprint. Long before luxury liners, this was a site of unrelenting labor and frequent fatality. Operations staff, particularly those working the late shift around the baggage staging areas and the secured loading ramp, report a distinct, unsettling residual energy. It is not heat or cold, but a profound, isolating oppression that seems to emanate from the pilings themselves. The most common recurring manifestation is the sound of heavy, waterlogged footsteps echoing across the polished concrete floors where no one is walking. These sounds often accompany a brief, sharp odor of brine and decayed linen, reminiscent of a body pulled too late from the brackish water. Historical records indicate numerous drownings among longshoremen during the original construction phase and during routine operations, sometimes documented simply as lost overboard. These incidents were often overlooked in the relentless pursuit of port efficiency. Security personnel have logged anomalous movements on infrared monitors near the gangway bridge's brief, shadow-like distortions that disappear when approached. This former docks area is a permanent waypoint for those who never boarded a vessel for pleasure. They remain trapped in the cycle of their final shift, manifesting briefly in the air conditioning and fluorescent light of modern transit, waiting for the cargo that will never arrive. Their persistent presence is an unnoticed counterpoint to the celebratory noise of departing tourists, anchored to the history beneath the polished marble. That's our countdown of the top 15 haunted places in Mobile, Alabama. From the chilling halls of the USS Alabama to the eerie whispers at Church Street Graveyard, Mobile's history truly lives on in its ghostly encounters. If you enjoyed exploring the port city's paranormal side, please like this video, subscribe for more deep dives, and hit that notification bell. Next time, we're heading across the state to unearth the unsettling legends of Ayer Deep, Huntsville's most haunted spots. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.